Adam Abdalla of Produce Wrestling. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
Before we get into my questions, can you tell me a little bit about the painting behind you?
Oh yeah, this is a portrait made by Lee Moriarty that he created for his solo exhibition in LA in September of 2025. It's the only work from the show that I kind of bought in myself because it appeared in the New York Times when they wrote their story about how professional wrestling was entering its museum era. So I thought, I'm an art collector, but most of the art that I own are kind of artifacts of personal relationships that I've had over the years, whether that be with
Mhm.
artists or athletes. And it's something that means a lot to me. So, it's normally not propped up behind me like this, but I figured for the purposes of this podcast, it was a good visual reference as we are discussing Taiga style.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Definitely fitting. You know, wrestling is art, and there are people out there who don't treat it as such, but as the creator of Orange Crush magazine, which offers a vivid showcase of pro wrestling in all its glory, you're certainly not one of them. But how do you go from the curator of this excellent publication to running the all-new wrestling promotion, Produce Wrestling?
Well, a lot of people, on a national basis aren't aware, but I was actually the booker. I was the co-booker and then I was the singular booker of Jersey Championship Wrestling from 2021 through 2026. I booked,
Mhm.
I believe, four iterations of the Jersey J Cup,
Wow.
which after the hiatus of the Battle of Los Angeles, I would say probably the most prominent independent wrestling tournament in the United States, up there with the Scenic City Invitational, which is actually taking place this weekend in
Yeah.
Tennessee. Um, and over the last, originally we kind of started as like GCW's little sister promotion. We would do shows either in small towns in Jersey or in kind of late night slots or daytime slots when they had big shows in Atlantic City. Um, and Brett and I kind of worked together to scout talent, take looks at people who are local. And in the last year, prior to me starting Produce, I really began to use it as my creative laboratory, not only for professional wrestling, but for other endeavors I work on creatively, like immersive and film. Um, so, for those of you who haven't watched JCW, starting probably from May 2025 through about February 2026, if you go back and watch that stuff, it's booked more like a territory with a lot of wrestlers from all around the country, many of which you see on the produce cards uh, now, cutting their teeth on the Northeast for the first time, as well as a lot of experimental and awesome, like kind of video packages and angles that I created with Ivan Firejay, who is my kind of my head of video at Produce.
Very cool. If all in is to AEW, I feel like Super Power Slam, a wrestling benefit for the neurodivergent community back in February, is to Produce Wrestling. Now, you did mention that you have some background in booking wrestling shows, but were you planning for that event for Superpower Slam to launch Produce, or was that something that you discovered during the planning process?
No, Produce was not conceived yet when I did Super Power Slam.
Mhm.
Susan Globus, the mother of my children, runs a very um, like an awesome nonprofit called the Little Oak Center for Neurodivergence that helps families of kids from 0 to 3 find resources as they kind of go through their battle with the city and the education system for those with AU ADHD. And I wanted just to figure out a way to like help jumpstart their public awareness and make some money. And through my work with Orange Crush and through my work with GCW and JCW over the last I don't know, from 2019 to 2026, I developed a lot of really great relationships with talent. My professional background is that I own a communications and marketing agency. I've worked with many of the world's top visual artists, architects, designers, film studios. So I know how to talk to artists, and I think I have a unique relationship with a lot of wrestlers because um, I speak to them as, problem solvers and polymaths as opposed to like, cattle, which a lot of promoters do.
Hmm.
So it's allowed me to kind of push the boundaries of what people think is allowed in terms of booking talent from television, doing interpromotional matches, and also just kind of asking them like, what's a match you've always wanted to do that you would be excited to do? So Superpower Slam was a great uh, example of that. It was kind of like a lighthearted show that had also the full throated support of GCW and Brett Lauderdale. It helped him get the venue. He had his production involved. Um, and it was something where I think a lot of people who now I see responding to me often on social media, it kind of reinvigorated their love of independent wrestling in the New York, New Jersey region because it brought an international style, but of like kind of or international style of show with a diverse offering of match typologies to New York City, which you would hope would have kind of like the pick of the best independent wrestling in the world. Um, but for many reasons, including just restrictions within the state athletic commission and things like that, has been deferred to places like New Jersey and Pennsylvania and so on. So I think that was a formative moment in me showing on a national basis, like the quality of my booking and relationships, even for like a show that was kind of like a one-off. And then uh, I think if you look at the J Cup the last 4 years and you look at the rosters of those shows, and then you go look at the rosters of national TV, you'll see a lot of interesting crossover matches. Like you'll see, we did Kevin Knight against Leon Slater. We did the astronauts against Speedball Mike Bailey and Jonathan Gresham. We did like some really amazing matches. Jordan Oliver and Speedball Mike Bailey had an incredible final in our first revival of that tournament. And so that's something I'm really proud of. I think the DNA of those shows, plus the DNA of late Jersey Championship Wrestling, until I kind of, resigned as booker to pursue produce, even though I'm still partners in it, was the space in which produce was formed. But not until after Jersey J Cup 2026 did I kind of come up with an idea about produce. And not until, honestly, and a lot of people don't like me for saying this kind of stuff, not until I went to WrestleMania this past year. I went to WrestleMania to like do a produce match, and
Hmm.
I was thinking about produce really as kind of like, you know, a promotion in the spirit of old Ring of Honor, Evolve, but also that would like pay tribute to history and feel like an old school professional wrestling promotion, but lighthearted. But not until I noticed how disrespected the current fans of professional wrestling were that weekend, did I realize, like, man, wrestling is in danger. It's not in danger because of AEW or Tony Khan. Like, I have full faith in what they're doing. But when people who don't understand what pro wrestling is say professional wrestling, sometimes they say WWE as a
Hmm.
as a euphemism, professional wrestling.
Yeah.
And that weekend, I had very nice seats for WrestleMania. I had a booth and I sat there and I brought talent with me. And I sat in a stadium as they played television commercials over the PA for 2 of the 4 hours that I was there. You will not see that in any other sport, no other premium event, the Super Bowl, World Cup, Major League Baseball. That was like, you know what? It's so cool that all these marks gave us $1,000, $2,000, took out payday loans, planned their entire year to come here and have this be something that they really look forward to. But you know what? They'll eat whatever slop they give us or we give them. So you know what? Let's just like make as much money as possible and not care about the experience of the fans or how much they care about that. And as somebody who's both in the business and a fan, and someone who has no masters, like I made my own money, it's not that much, like I'm not a billionaire, I'm hardly a millionaire, and I was like, fuck this shit. I was staring at a poster or a huge screen for 2 hours, right? Of a $1 Snickers bar, larger than life. while I was sitting in a booth for 2 days that I paid $10,000 for. So it's like, this is what you want from me, and that's what you think of me. And you know what? I need to change that. So I took after that, I took protest a whole lot more seriously. I'm like, how do I find the best wrestlers in the world and bring them to the fans who appreciate the most? And then also beyond that, how do we bring pro wrestling together to save pro wrestling as an idea? How do we create a universe where it's like major independents, CMLL, New Japan, Stardom, AEW, Ring of Honor, Rev Pro, Progress, whatever, you know? The idea of, you know, like how do you make wrestling great again to mock, some of the worst people in this world?
Hmm.
Make it great again by bringing back suspension of disbelief, by presenting it as a sport, and putting on a show not for the fans you think you have or what you think
Hmm.
wrestling fans are capable of um, understanding. You put a show on for the fans you want. I want to put on fucking A24 professional wrestling, right?
Oh,
That's what I want this to be.
oh, that's so cool. I love that. I just got chills when you said that. That's wrestling needs that again, for sure. But going back a little bit,
Right.
when did you first fall in love with pro wrestling? What were your early experiences with it?
Um, I first fell in love with professional wrestling when I was probably 5 years old. I was a kid raised by TV. My dad left when I was 2 years old. My mother had clinical depression. So I was and I lived, and I had a room in an apartment in Sunset Park, Brooklyn, with no windows. And I watched a lot of TV. And my mom would sometimes take me to the video store, and I wasn't, taken by the movies. I was taken by the shelf that had like Coliseum Home Video, right? Like WWF pay-per-views from the 80s. I bought a tape. She let me buy a tape of SummerSlam 88, which wasn't even like, if you go back, well, not good a show, but I was a little kid.
Mhm.
Uh, but it opened a door for me to go back and watch the Royal Rumbles to convince, family members to help pay for buying pay-per-views. I remember I bought SummerSlam 91. I'm 41 years old, so I'll give you context. I was born on July 9th. Um, I bought SummerSlam 91, didn't tape it like an idiot. First thing I taped was Survivor Series Showdown and then Survivor Series 91 on VHS.
Wow.
Then I discovered WCW. I taped Super Brawl, I believe 18, the one with the Steiners against Cactus Jack and Vader, or
Mhm.
no, Vader and Mr. Hughes. And then Royal Rumble 92, which then became like incredibly influential. That's one that Ric Flair won. It's the one where Roddy Piper won the Intercontinental title. It was one of my favorite wrestlers ever. Um, and after that, like I fell in love with pro wrestling. And anytime I had a major life event, like wrestling was there for me. When I had my tonsils and adenoids taken out, I had tubes for my ear when I was um, 7 years old, uh, or actually 8 years old. My mom, as a get well present, got me nosebleeds to WrestleMania 10. I went to see Bret Hart wrestle Owen Hart. I went to see Shawn Michaels wrestle Razor Ramon in a ladder match. And and even as a child, like I could recognize like what great pro wrestling looked like and who were the people who were authentic, and maybe that's like my neurodivergence. Like I have this wrestling um, like intuition and also like a photographic memory, but that helped form things for me. And then by the time I was maybe 11 or 12, I'd already, I got AOL. I was online. There was no internet really popularized
Mhm.
then. And I was in the chat rooms. I was on the tape trading forums. And this was even before like Death Valley Driver was popularized. We had RSPW. We had chat rooms on MIRC. There were boards called TTT, the Tape Traders Forum, that people like Sanjay Dutt were on there as like Hindu 133, like, and I began to educate myself about lucha libre, about Japanese deathmatch wrestling, about ECW before, it was like the ECW that was, that happened before I was watching it on TV at the time. And it became like really my special interest. And by the time I was probably 13 or 14, I started going to independent shows. I started going to Jersey All Pro Wrestling in Bayonne, New Jersey, which because I lived in South Brooklyn, it was close because it's right over the
Mhm.
Arizona Bridge. and right over the Bayonne Bridge. And I saw death matches with people like Homicide in like 1999, 2000. I saw Loki wrestle his first matches against his cousin, Monster Mac. I went to ECW shows on bus trips that Mike Johnson put together when I was a kid.
God.
Go to the ECW arena in 1999, and then he brought it back for Ring of Honor starting in 2002. And then from 2002 up until, maybe when Jim Cornette took over in 2008, I would go to every major Ring of Honor show with my friends, and I was part of a community of people who would drive all around the Northeast and fly to like weekends, and it became like, my second family as a fan, And I would dabble from time to time, like I'd work street team for late ECW. I handed out flyers and from the World Restaurant in Times Square. I'd work ring crew where I just show up to MLW, the Hammerstein Ballroom at 2000, in 2002 for free so I can fucking work my ass off carrying, huge steel beams to the seventh floor of Hammerstein Ballroom while I was a teenager with Tammy Sitch and Chris Candido so I can go and shake the hand of Terry Funk and Jerry Lynn and Satoshi Kojima and Sabu, you know? Like I love this shit forever. And, but it was always an escape. It was never a profession, right? But that's like early me. That's
Mhm.
how I interact with pro wrestling. That's how I appreciated it. That's how I became to like to love it online and in person. I actually wrote my bachelorette thesis on. I have a double degree in political science and anthropology. Um, so I wrote one part of the paper about representation in professional wrestling, and how ethnicity is used, um, and also just kind of geopolitics. And the
Mhm.
other thing I wrote about was the use of sound in professional wrestling from
Oh.
anthropology perspective as a almost Pavlovian device, and how professional wrestling is one of the only art forms in which the performance itself changes based on the sounds of the audience and not just cheers and boos.
Mhm.
When there's claps, when I think people react to the sound of a chair shot. So
Mhm.
I've always thought about this like super critically, like, and at a time when wrestling was much less respected, like you seem
Mhm.
like a fucking nerd. But I never cared, because I was always like it brought me so much joy.
Yeah,
So
that's such a fascinating topic, sound in pro wrestling.
I found that I dug up the paper because I'm curating this museum show now,
Mhm.
and I never had it digitally, but they sent me a scanned piece of it. And I shared it with my co-curator of the show that I'm doing in 2027. And for a 21-year-old, it holds up, I would say.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Something you said just then made me think of Kevin Smith when he said that the new American dream is finding out what you love and making money while doing it. But as someone who also monetizes their hobbies, do you ever have instances where you look at pro wrestling and you're just like so frustrated with how intertwined it's become in your professional and personal life?
No, because I mean, to be frank, while I was doing all this, I was also basically uh, working for the last 20 years as a publicist in the world of visual art, architecture, design, and entertainment.
Hmm.
Um, I started as a front desk clerk at a PR firm. I actually started by moving to New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina in
Oh.
2006. I moved down there. I did volunteer work, helping people rebuild their homes after the storm. My friends were all visual artists at the time because I went to SUNY Purchase, who had a great visual art program.
Hmm.
And I wrote a proposal to their board of directors to start a DIY space in New Orleans in the water damage storage facility of this nonprofit called the Green Project, which was like the Salvation Army meets Home Depot. And I lived in that warehouse with my friends. We built it out. I was coughing up green shit for a year afterwards, post Katrina, like. And then I went back to New York and I was like, oh, is this a job? Can you promote the arts as a job? Because it wasn't something that was popularized as an idea in like 2006, 2007.
Hmm.
And I found a receptionist job at a boutique PR firm specializing in art architecture and design. And I did not look like the typical person you put at a front desk. Like I was a fat kid from Brooklyn. But the owner of that business was like, this kid's really smart. And like, we're only paying him like $25,000 a year. Right. So like, let's give it a shot. And then the crash of 2008 happened, a lot of the middle management was laid off. And they were like, hey, why don't you pick up the phone and see if you can do this job? And I could. I was placing stories for my clients. Within 2.5 years, I was poached by Nadine Johnson, who's one of the most infamous publicists in the history of New York City. She was married to, at a time, Richard Johnson, who founded Page Six, the New York Post. And when I came in there, I started working on her arts clients, of which she had like two when I started. I stayed there for almost 6 years. When I left, I had about 40 and 10 people working for me. But she didn't give me equity. So I left and I started over again. I started my own. I said, I got sued by her too for leaving. And I started my own company from scratch called Cultural Council, which just started with myself and one of my best friends and my business partner, digital counselor, named Marcella Zimmerman. And then over the last 11 years, we've grown to be probably one of the most prominent agencies working in the arts globally. So that gave me the leeway, that gave me a little extra scratch to think about, okay, like wrestling's the thing that makes me happy when I'm not working, even though I love art, like art makes me happy too. So, and deference to what you said about Kevin Smith. Yeah, I figured out how to make up a job that didn't exist, and do the thing that I love. But I was still missing the thing I loved the most, you know? So I started originally by like, all right, I have a little extra scratch. Man, what if I buy like a ring logo with GCW? The first time you'll see me, if you go through my old social media, I'm in the ring with Penelope Ford and Joey Janela at Lost in New York in 2018. It says Cultural Council on the ring. That was my company at the time before, it still is, before Orange Crush. And then I was like, okay, well, this is like kind of surface. Like, what can I do that actually gives back to the community and believes in my values, which is that talent and passionate talent are the lifeblood of professional wrestling. It's not the fucking letters on the marquee. It's the people who give their bodies and give their life for the fans, and also to fulfill something within inside of them. So I created Orange Crush as a way to create parity in people's eyes between professional wrestling and other art forms. Also give kind of like the Vanity Fair, Vogue treatment to professional wrestlers, where they work with like real writers who can talk critically about their personalities and their personas both. And also help me discover like who are the true geniuses outside of wrestling who love wrestling, So I talked to people like Raymond Pettibon. I profiled like I had profiled by a writer named by Charlie Fox, Matthew Barney, who didn't really care about pro wrestling, but he was an amateur wrestling and he cared about bodybuilding. And it was like, okay, all these things are like part of the same DNA of what we care about. And I did 3 issues of annual journals that were about 120 pages, no ads, just like with original photography, with also the intent of creating a micro economy where I would actually pay people who take pictures of wrestling or draw things in wrestling where they weren't being paid before, because promoters would be like, why should I pay you? It's like, well, because it's work, and I respect it. And I've never not paid someone for work in my life. And I think not paying someone for a job they've done, whether it's good, bad, or otherwise, is one of the most despicable things you can do in life. And if you try to screw people out of their value, it comes back on you, whether in this life or the next one. So, that kind of like took shape as I deepened relationships with individual artists. Nick Karp, who's a dear friend of mine, and I had an idea. I originally had an idea about doing a follow-along documentary photo book about Zona 23 and the Junkyard, which is where they have deathmatch wrestling in the kind of like outskirts of urban Mexico City. We had a ticket to go shoot it. COVID hit. We couldn't go. So we did a zine called Death in COVID, where Nick had already been traveling around the United States, going to states with various levels of regulation to document both the fans and the wrestlers doing extremely risky things in an extremely dangerous time. And some people hated us for it because I called it Death in COVID. They're like, this is exploitative. I was like, you know what? It's a fucking literary reference. Maybe you should read it. It's called, Death in Venice,
Yeah.
like, but I was young too, and I was a bit abrasive, as I still am. And so we did that. And then fast forward to 2023, I was like, let's bring that idea back. Let's do it bigger. So my friend Brett Lauderdale was set to be the first US promotion to do a full-throated show at Korakuen Hall in Tokyo under their own banner. And so Nick and I did a follow-along photo book called Visitors in 2024. It was a beautiful hand-painted book, like in the classic style of like Daido Moriyama, and we released that. I curated an exhibition about the book, large-scale photography that was shown in New York, Atlantic City, and then back to Tokyo when they returned a year later. And I was like, okay, well, I feel like I've exhausted like a lot of like the crossover of wrestlers who are artists or artists who like wrestling. And it would be far more additive if I could actually help some individual wrestlers hone their careers outside of wrestling, outside of the ring. So Lee Moriarty and I had a conversation that was active, and he DM'd me on Twitter. He's like, "Hey man, like I went to school for design. Like I love to draw. It's like, how does somebody get their foothold in the art world?" And I was like, as somebody who was like working with like Jeff Koons and stuff, I was like, well, like to get started, if you want to see how good you are, just like paint at scale and paint on canvas, see what it looks like. Little did I know he was a fucking savant, and like they look like this, right? Out the
Yeah,
gate.
that's wow.
So I was like, all right, I'm going to sell these. So I took a booth at NADA Miami 2024, which is kind of like the most prestigious emerging art fair in the United States. We sold out the booth. I was able to place one of the works with the Perez Museum in Miami. So he became the first active professional wrestler to have his work purchased by or acquired by a contemporary art museum in the United States, especially a major one. The Perez is the biggest museum in Miami, in a major city. And then at the same time, I was also traveling to Japan quite a bit for the work I was doing with visitors in that book, just because I loved going to the G1, I loved going to Wrestle Kingdom, and I formed a relationship with Tekla, who I then learned had went to art school and was a painter herself. And I went to her apartment in Koenji that she was living in at the time and did a studio visit. And I was like, these works are incredible. Like these are so cool. They're so different. They're almost like, like expressionistic, like, German painting. And we became fast friends. And then about 6 months later, I curated Tekla's first exhibition in New York as part of NADA New York 2025, which opened the same week she signed with AEW, right?
Perfect timing.
Perfect time. Meanwhile, one of the conversations I had in Lee's booth was with the board of trustees of the MFA St. Petersburg, Florida, where I met a curator named Catherine Pill, who was slowly becoming a wrestling fan. And I said, well, an idea for a show. And she had an idea for a show. We had an idea for a show together. It's called House Show. We're doing it in November 2027, the first American large-scale museum show about art and professional wrestling, 5,000 square feet, over 50 works, publication with Rizzoli, and I'm gonna have a ring in that museum, and we're gonna have produce shows there.
Oh my God.
So all of these things kind of happened in parallel while I was booking JCW, while I was running a company. And also, thereafter I started to like pick up other projects in similar field. Like I just produced a boxing documentary called On the Line with my friend Vincent Piazza from Tulsa King. I'm doing a documentary about the history of a very special show on MTV from 1990 called Buzz that's coming out in September. I just produced a play with Colin Quinn in New York as well, which you may have seen commercials on Produce One. So like I spent a lifetime in service and renting my ideas to other people, or just being a money mark in the way people kind of like would do it. But I didn't do it because I was like naive. I did it because it brought me a lot of joy. And I did it because I, unbeknownst to everyone else, was using this as a creative laboratory for me to express myself, because I'm all I'm all thumbs, man. Like I can't make art myself. I can visualize things, I have a vision for what I want to do, but I can't make it. I'm not somebody I have two left feet. I fell down the stairs at my premiere and fucking dislocated my two fingers. And I
Oh my
still,
gosh.
like, but I recognize talent and
Mhm.
I recognize what makes people believe, what makes them suspend disbelief, and what gets them excited about leaving the house. Because in a world where our visual culture has been ravaged by like AI slop, stuff that's not made by AI that looks like AI slop for some reason, and values of what goes is funded by major corporations are completely distorted. It's like let's give a $300 million to make a action movie that people are going to watch once on Netflix because everyone's going to watch it once and not really pay attention, and then not fund the 100 movies by auteurs, by the John Waters, David Cronenberg's, fucking Abel Ferraras of the world, right? Because let's make a big bet on something easy. It's less work for us to do one
Mhm.
thing that sucks as opposed to 300 things that are good. And you know what? I say fuck that because what you're doing is robbing a generation of artists creating their craft. And I, and everything that I do and everything I've ever done has been because artists made that possible for me. What they created gave me an opportunity to make money. It gave me an opportunity to feed my kids, gave me an opportunity to own an apartment, to do silly fucking shit like I'm doing right now. And that's where I got to where I am today.
Oh man. I think from everything that you've said so far, it's clear that you're unlike any wrestling promoter that's been in the business, and at least today, But the you know being a departure from the traditional promoter dynamic, you're more of a co-producer because, we mentioned Lee Moriarty, Jonathan Gresham curated your first show. So you have the wrestlers really stepping front and center. You're putting your money where your mouth is, and you're backing up what you say by really showcasing the wrestler and having them involved in every step of the way. I mean, we got Rocky Romero coming up, Joey Janela and Megan Bayne, the Dogs. Rock and Roll Express. Like,
Well, Express,
man,
I'm having a show with Carl Fredericks on Indigenous Peoples Day that we're going to do in New York
oh,
City.
sick.
We're doing a show called Friday on Black Friday with Darian Bankston and Darius Lockhart. I've got some real cool shit planned for 27 that I can't announce quite yet until I sign the venue
Hmm.
contracts. But, you know, can I be honest with you?
Sure.
I'm not actually doing anything that innovative.
Mm.
I'm giving credit to the talent for the things that they've always done and for promoters who are kind of bereft of ideas but not egos have taken credit for, right?
Mm.
So I go to my talent and be like, okay, we have a regular or my co-producers. I'm like, we have a regular crew. I'm going to build like 60% of the show around our regular crew so we can have our fans be invested. So there's ongoing storylines. So there's matches I want to do. I'm paying for it, right?
Mhm.
But you know who's next. You're out there rest. You have an intuition about this. I don't. You know who could be a star based on idiosyncrasies that I don't necessarily pick up on because it's not me
Mhm.
physically doing it. And also, like, people are paying, people are paying to see you. People, especially on an independent level, like the talent is responsible for getting people's fucking asses in the seats
Mhm.
and for very little money. They're not doing this for the money. They're doing it for the love of the game. And yes, there's a dream. There was once a dream like, yes, I want to do this for a living and get rich and wrestle in WWE or wrestle in AEW now, which is actually, I think, a more viable way to make a living long term in pro wrestling. I mean, we could talk about this if you want. We don't have to. But one of the reasons I got in trouble recently is because I talked some shit about WWID
Mhm.
because I thought they were selling young kids a bill of goods about the kind of support they were offering them. When in reality, if you look at history of TKO and the things that they own, um, generally they have a gradated strategy to eliminate entire pay classes of talent, right? So, they're paying independent wrestlers to wrestle on Tubi, which is Fox owned. They're paying wrestlers with Evolve contracts to wrestle on NXT. Okay, so where do those Evolve contracts go eventually for $100,000, $125,000? as opposed to the $500,000 to $1 million that people on Raw and SmackDown get. Those are going to become the contracts on television because
Hmm.
that's more akin to the pay scale. They're used to it in UFC, right?
Hmm.
Vince McMahon was a lot of things. He was a terrible person, or is a terrible person. But you know what? And they came up with very like archaic and weird ways to maintain the independent contractor statuses of wrestling with like buckets and weird shit. But like, you know, he paid people all right. Like he came up with a lot of structures that like negged people where it's like,
Hmm.
well, your minimum guarantee is $400,000. And I'm gonna show you on a piece of paper that actually we're losing money on you, but you get the money, right? Now, these guys, first of all, don't give a fuck about pro wrestling. They're not even wrestling fans.
Hmm.
Or two, they created an entire global business. Ari Emanuel is a talent agent, right? And owns the only sports franchises in the United States without a union that pay the talent about 5 to 10% of the fucking gross as opposed to 50, right? So he's not only a charlatan, but he's also a hypocrite.
Hmm.
Well, he's sitting there with Anna Wintour talking about how he's so like sophisticated intellectual on her podcast. Um, and like a lot of people can see the writing on the wall, but a lot of people aspire to work for these people, or it's the only avenue for their dreams. So they can't say this stuff in public. I've achieved a lot of my dreams. My dream right now is putting together the most badass fucking punk rock pro wrestling promotion on a national basis that brings together the fans of professional wrestling, music, art, film, and other subcultures in one room and just have it be something that has integrity, but is still a whole lot of fun and gives a platform to that talent.
Absolutely, man. Well, I did want to talk about WWE ID, so I'm gonna jump to that question
Yeah.
now. I mean, you did kind of make your feelings heard about how you really feel about the program and its impact on the independent scene, but based on what's happened, are you turned off from booking those prospects on your shows in the future now?
It's a catch 22, right? It's like when I said I'm not going to book you again, like to people if they cancel from my shows, that wasn't like me condemning the talent. It was me trying
Mm,
to demonstrate the possible ramifications of like conducting business a certain way. Because I didn't get
mm,
a like basically the text I got from Charlie, from Marcus, were like, hey man, like we can't make the show on the 16th because we're booked in Orlando on the 17th and 18th. And I'm like, well, that's a weird thing for an independent wrestler to say because
mm,
generally you fly in the same day if you're an independent wrestler. It's like, oh, we have medical and we have like pre-tapes. And I was like, I'm not gonna say which one of them I sent to. I'm like, are you getting paid for that day? They didn't respond. And I was like, Marcus Mathers is 21 years old. Starboy Charlie's 21 years old. Maybe they're 22 now. They were asked to sign a restrictive contract under the auspice that they of like a grant program. Like this is professional development. This is the way for you to like get $500 a week, get nicer boots, tights. But you know what? It's on you to go out and get booked by top independents and represent WID out there on the independents. And if you don't succeed. You might lose your ID contract. We'll cut you. They've cut people.
mm,
Um, is it a coincidence that I'm on my AEW and they made that call to me? Maybe. As far as I know, they're still allowed. And there were people on the independents who said to me, like, don't book people from WID. It's like this is like really bad. And I'm like, I'm not going to make that determination and not work with people that I've worked for 6 years until I see it with my own eyes. I'm going to give the benefit of the doubt to the talent, right? And I know the position they were in. I know the position I put them in. But nobody from WWE ID called me and be like, hey man, I'm sorry that we had to pull our talent from your show. They had two 21-year-old kids text me being like, ham hum, like shit that
uh,
sense when you know how this world works. So to me, I think I articulated before what my greater
mm,
concern is. It's not like me being upset about them not being on my show. Like I
mm,
knew this was a possibility of booking them because I was just generally suspicious anyway. That's why even though like Marcus was a main eventer in Jersey Championship Wrestling, even though Starboy Charlie main evented my fucking birthday show against the Motor City Machine Guns and Lee Moriarty in JCW, I was booking them in 10-man tags and battle royals. I was like, let me see what happens here.
mm,
Because I don't want to like, get the fans invested on a heavy, level. until there's a track record of at least a few shows where saying like these guys working in good faith. And it made it very apparent very quickly that they weren't, and
Hmm.
they were willing to use lovable, uh, very young independent wrestlers as human shields to protect their um, tribalistic business interests. So
Hmm.
that's what I think about that. Would I use them again? No, I wouldn't use anybody in WWE contract again. Um, like as a as something that I like, unless they were extraordinary and unless I can do things interesting creatively where we can use the fact that that denomination as something in the creative, you know.
Hmm.
Like if we can use that to get people to think about the dynamics, like
Hmm.
I'd be down to do it. I don't think they would let me do it.
Oh, so the door is not completely closed on Marcus Mathers popping up in produce again.
I mean, I don't on my side it's not, no.
Hmm. That's so interesting that, that was the way that they chose to go about it, considering who runs Evolve and how they know how these things work on the independent level. But then to do that to independent promoters, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Oh yeah, I mean he's the same guy who charges $200 a session going around to talk to people about how to achieve their dreams, you know. But in reality, they're dream killers. You know, they're getting these kids unbooked from lots of shows. You know, they're
Hmm.
giving them a stink because they're not working like they should be. And every other form of the arts, whether it's film, dance, music, there's a nonprofit model and there's also corporate responsibility programs that like give grants to people to like go get better. And they're not like, you know, if you get a corporate grant from like Coca-Cola, you know, or something like that, they're like, well, if you make a song, we own the first rights to it. Unless, you know, and if Pepsi wants it, you got to tell us. Like, that's not how that shit works. That's not
Right.
how real life works. This is an exploitative structure that they've created to cover their bases, you know, and it's like in very bad faith. And like, you know, if anybody in wrestling ever had the resources at that young level to like be like, this contract's probably like illegal. It's definitely exploitative. Um, I think you could probably poke a lot of holes in it. I've never seen one.
Mm.
I just understand I understand what the intent is, and I understand the ethos of it and what they're saying they do, what they actually do, and it's not the same thing.
Hmm.
I think it's a very nefarious thing.
Mm. So you did mention my AEW, and it's pretty amazing how you guys got on this service right off the bat. Huge name connected to a huge wrestling company. Can streaming with independent wrestling is like such uh a hot space to be in right now, you know? But I was kind of reminded of when the WWE Network first announced that they would be streaming Evolve and Progress and ICW, and many people were really critical of that. And, a common perception was that the WWE would ruin the indies by doing this. But since the launch of my AEW, it almost looks like Tony Khan is doing the same thing with, indies like Produce and Warrior and Limitless, C4 and others. But as someone with more insight into the situation, what makes these two situations different?
Well, first of all, um, this thing is being overseen by
Mm,
people who love professional wrestling.
hmm.
Chris Harrington, like this is his pet project within AEW, and you know, they are giving extremely generous like deal points to independent promotions. They are open to different types of structure.
Mm,
You know, like a lot of people, they see their benefit as live event sales as their future. You know, I'm investing enough in my product and I'm bringing enough talent that people pay to see on a
mm,
global scale that I'm like, you know what? I want to make these pay-per-views because I've been trained in the entertainment business to understand like how kind of streaming works these days. And um, one of the reasons that most we have all these streaming services filled with unwatchable slop is because they've come to the conclusion that the audience doesn't matter that much because the audience isn't paying anymore, you know? So they have to come up with these like very uh, kind of Byzantine, like integrated advertising structures to make the money that they need. That's why kind of WWE looks the way it is right
mhm,
now. Um, and I was like, I believe in people who are passionate in subcultures. People who care will pay for the thing that they want, you
mhm,
know? And some people could be like, I don't want to pay this. I'm going to steal it. I'm like, okay, well, fuck you. You could steal it. But I believe there's people who want this stuff to exist and will pay for
mhm,
it to happen. Um, Chris Chris gave me that opportunity. Um, I think we exceeded expectations in terms of the amount of effort, marketing, quality of matches, quality of production for somebody who'd never done it before on paper.
Hmm.
You know, I brought in favors from celebrity friends to do voiceovers for our first show. I brought in Abel Ferrara to come and perform in New York City. Like, I want to show people what's possible when you care about the audience, when you care about the talent, and there's a tent behind what you do. And I know people don't like to hear the truth. I know just in my everyday life, I'm kind of a blowhard. Like, people don't like to hear the truth. They're not used to it. They don't like confrontation. But this is fucking pro wrestling. We're monetizing confrontations. I feel like I'm a
Hmm.
to come out there and be like, fuck you, let's fucking go. Because, you know, any form of art, I think I see that my definition of art is the conflict of ideas, right? And I think there's no greater conflict of ideas than ones that can be resolved in the squared circle.
Oh man, hell yeah. All right. So clearly you have your hands full with all of these events planned throughout the rest of the
And it
year,
hurts, man.
and it hurts. Being involved in all these different endeavors and produce wrestling, now generating all
A
the
triple
buzz that it
entendre. You
is.
can say produce, you can say produce, because get it. Like Jim Cornette's like produce. Oh, I don't get it. You know, it's because in Japan, when a wrestler books a show and promotes under his own name, it's a produce show, right? It's not.
Ah,
Also, I'm Orange Crush, so
right.
oranges. And then also, the like all the wrestlers are producers. So there's at least three meetings behind the name, and there's
I
probably
love it.
you don't need to fucking go on about
As a writer, I love layers to a story for
it.
sure. But it does seem like you're in this for the long haul with produce wrestling. So what are your bigger, long reach goals for the promotion?
I'm on it till the wheels fall off. You know, we'll see how long
Yeah.
it is. But I feel like there's momentum.
Hmm.
And my goal, or initially, was like, let's get this thing launched. Let's put on this like new model. Let's get it, like create a new way that helps people suspend disbelief by treating wrestling in a very specific way that does not ignore that your fan base is reading about everything happening around the world. Like I don't have to
Hmm.
acknowledge every angle everybody does and incorporate it into my show, but like top line shit that people are like, I associate this person with that, or they won this title or whatever. Like ignoring that is it's taking people out of it. So I
Hmm.
want people in it. After producing our first show, even though it wasn't perfect, I was like, you know what? I look at what some people who have TV deals right now and the level of intent and level of creativity, like we should have a TV show eventually, you know? So right now, I want to put on the best show possible.
Hmm.
I want to bring talent that is under recognized, underappreciated, or looked over and give them a platform to be seen with their peers from New Japan Pro Wrestling, from AEW, from TNA, from Ring of Honor, and then I want to I want to partner with the best wrestling promoters. When I say the best wrestling promoters, I mean the people who care about the talent, who care about the fans, and put on matches and show talent that I want to book on my own shows to
Hmm.
create a new paradigm in professional wrestling where there's professional wrestling is one world, and we all work together to fight a $70 billion corporation who wears wrestling on their back to the world but doesn't give a fuck about it, you
Hmm.
know? So that's what I want to do. How that takes shape, whatever. Do I want to be the A24 of pro wrestling? Do I want to be the Vice of pro wrestling? Do I want to be fucking a wrestling show for that you can bring your girlfriend to? You can take them on a date and still get laid because you'd make them watch somebody pull out a table with a Slim Jim logo on it while you're sitting in jelly roll, Logan Paul.
Ugh.
That's what I want because that's my own experience. And it's like,
Hmm.
this is embarrassing. Like I don't like I hope for produce never to be embarrassing, you know.
Hmm.
Because us wrestling fans have been wrestling fans for a long time, you know, and this is one of the things that TKO doesn't understand is like, and how they don't understand the difference between the UFC and the professional wrestling fan base. We've been bullied bullied for being wrestling fans our whole life, you
Hmm.
know? Um, and even Vince, I mean, Vince McMahon was a fucking maniac, but like he respected like the sanctity of the canvas. You know, it's why I have a
Hmm.
white on white canvas. That's like my fuck you. It's like,
Mm.
it's like it's gonna get dirty, I'll probably cut it up and sell them as paintings later. But at our core, our intentions are pure.
Hell yeah. Oops. Just, oh, stop. Okay. Awesome. Oh my God. There's so much that I want to touch on, but you've generously given so much of your time. Now, I guess well, first, I do want to say I love how diverse your cards are, from the talent to the styles. You know, uh, as you said, wrestling fans grew up being bullied for liking wrestling. I mean, remember the Kai Tai stuff with Val Venus? One of the few times that Asian talent was showcased on WWE TV. And of course, being the kid who likes wrestling and the Asian kid, the only one in my grade, I might add.
Yeah, I'm sure they
Yeah,
got some choppy PP at fucking school, right?
all the time.
Like,
Yeah,
how fucking
exactly.
stupid was that? I was an ECW fan a year prior. Those guys had one of the greatest matches in the history of fucking pay-per-view at Barely Legal. The Michinoku Pro 10-man
Hell
tag.
yeah.
Taka Michinoku and Great Sasuke stole the show at Canadian Stampede,
Hmm.
1997. And because of how reductive people were and how they thought people experienced life and race, like
Yeah.
a big fucking joke, and
Hmm.
like that's a very damaging thing.
Hmm.
And this is a global. I come from a global job, a global perspective, and we sell pay-per-views to a global audience. You
Hmm.
know, um, so as I want to partner with promotions in Japan, in Korea, in UK, in South America, Germany, wherever, to bring some of their best talent here and send some of my talent there. Like that's the vision. You know.
Oh man, that would be great. Well, if I may, put out a request, the Filipino wrestling scene is starting to blow up, and I think it would be great to get a spotlight over there on people like Super P, and just see them get more airtime. That would be great because like as much as I got made fun of for being a wrestling fan and the Asian representation in American wrestling also platformed Pacific Islanders in a way that no other art form was doing at the time. So it was just like, yeah, I mean, Rikishi's doing cool stuff as Fatu, and Yokozuna has to be a sumo wrestler, but like they're at the top, So I was taking it, but then as I grew, it was just like we can have more.
But
So I'm
also,
glad.
people don't. I mean, people I guess realize it, but they don't think about it. It's like
Hmm.
all this influence stuff. It's the it is the quiet influence of the Rock's hand, right?
Hmm.
That has created this mythos around uh, some Polynesian wrestlers being the toughest, most legendary, unbeatable wrestlers in the world. They weren't booked like that in the 80s, like in the first
Right.
one, They were booked as like cool, like kind of badass mid carders with hard heads, like
Hmm.
Rock changed that and made it very difficult for them not to book people like that. I'm sure he like had a lot of influence on that. Like, this is my family, and I have more juice than any of you motherfuckers, and I always
Yeah.
will. And that changes the way, like, if you have the power to change the way people perceive a group of people because of your leverage and you use it, that's what I'm trying to do. Like
Hmm.
I'm pulling my favors. I'm pulling my favors, and I'm using my juice, which is like a photographic memory and like a real deep historic knowledge of professional wrestling, to come up with ideas that are going to get talent and bookers excited to want to work with me.
Hmm.
Some people have more base intentions. Like, I just want to put on wrestling that I want to watch because there's like 20 hours of wrestling on it a week, and I don't want to watch all that much of it. Like, I mean, obviously I love AEW. I want to watch a lot of their shows, but even that, it's like, if you have a real life, it's hard to watch 4 or 5 hours of wrestling a week.
It's true.
So I want to put on a show that services the most hardcore audience who likes to watch a lot of wrestling and brings new fans into the conversation who
Hmm.
think about wrestling differently as a platform for creative um, collaboration, like almost like an artist collective.
Yes, definitely. I love that so much. Leaving something better than you found it is something that I value. And it seems like that is what you're trying to do here with produce, and I commend you for it.
I would like that, you know. It's a lot of work. It's hard not to burn out, flame out when you go as hard as I do in life, and
Hmm.
maybe you're as passionate or angry or ADHD a little bit. Also, like everybody's gonna come for me because I tell the truth, or I tell what I perceive to be the truth, at least, you know.
Sure.
So I'm sure there can be moments where I'm not my best online, or when I respond too much because I have a lifetime. I've been a promoter and a writer for quite a long time, but I've never stopped being a fan. I've never wanted to
Hmm.
stop watching the show from the audience, even when I write it, you know, because I think about things like, hey, this show sounds different when I sit on the floor than when I sit on the stage. Like the heat is
Hmm.
better when you sit on the floor. So I always want to sit on the floor, but I'm a guy who's trying to sell seats in the balcony and the stage now because I'm a promoter. So there's like these contradictions that will present themselves. But I just want people to realize, like, at the end of the day, if I'm an asshole, it's because I love this shit too much. It's not like I don't care if like my name wasn't on it, frankly. I just know the power of like personality driven publicity because I've done it for 20 years. So to have me be a representation, to be able to come out and say these things and say the things that people are afraid to say themselves or can't because they're not in the financial position, they don't want to fuck up their future prospects. Like I'm happy to do it. I can't tell you how many more people message me in private after the things that I've said recently about some of these things than said things in public.
Hmm.
20 to 1, and that's okay. It makes me feel like what I'm doing is worth it, even if I have to take some bullets.
Absolutely. Well, last question, and I'll let you go because it's been about an hour and of great conversation. But you have so many great collaborators in produce coming up on the schedule. I remember hearing Zack Sabre Jr. wanting to get in on that too. So who's your
Zach's in as soon as his New Japan schedule allows him and
hell yeah.
the venue. Sorry, finish your question.
No, it's all good. So who would be your dream collaborator for a produce show from all of wrestling history? If you had the New Day's time machine and you could pull anyone in, who would you want to make a show with?
History, huh? That's a real good question, man. I know it's almost cliche now because of how he's used as like a symbol of like someone like Terry Funk.
Mm,
Terry Funk. Um, I think I mean there's some people, Brian Danielson,
oh hell yeah.
Blue Panther, which is not impossible, you
Right?
know. Um, I think uh Kenta Kobashi.
Hell yeah.
That's where my name comes from. I don't particularly like oranges. That's kind of the joke. It's funny. I sent a bunch of girls to Raw in Atlantic City to hand out oranges and tell
Hmm.
the fans at the Boardwalk Hall. I posted on Instagram, like wrestling can be good for you, and hand them oranges. And like 90% of the people at the show were like, I don't eat fruits and vegetables. Like, I don't want that shit. And then we brought the girls back the same night to the to Pioneer Works, and every single person took the orange in the room. I think that shows you a little bit about like the difference in the fan bases and like how like we have some room, like some work to do to
Hmm.
get the audience we want a little bit. But there's like just so many. There's so many. Bret Hart. I'd love to do a Stampede.
Oh my God.
Dream. Roddy Piper. Do something in Portland. Like um, I mean, Dusty Rhodes.
Of
Like,
course.
there's so many like people who work for WWE I can't work. Steve Corino,
Mm,
wrestling genius.
yeah.
Wrestled for the first time when I was like 13, no, 13 years old at NWA New York at a hospital in Staten Island
Oh my God.
in 1998. And then I saw him wrestle at MLW and I saw him wrestle in ECW, saw him wrestle everywhere else. Like there are just people that I have a tremendous respect for. That I also, co-own the Independent Wrestling Hall of Fame with Brett Lauderdale, and will always be endlessly fascinated by the creativity and nexus of ideas that wrestlers could bring to the table.
Hell yeah. I mean, selfishly, I'd love to see Bull Nakano, do a produce show with you. I think, having these Joshi wrestlers on a stage like this would be phenomenal. I mean, you're already having incredible Joshi talent, so
Manami Toyota,
yeah, absolutely. God.
Aja Kong, you know, let's like there's the dude. I have commissioned paintings in my office of Aja Kong versus Bull Nakano in a cage match that are in all the Zoom rooms of all my staff. You know,
Sick.
so like by this artist Helen Hunter, who's a great like like painter on demand from Portland, who does a lot of
Hmm.
paintings. Like Too Cold Scorpio. Like there's just like, and it's funny because like you'll look at our shows and there's great representation, but like I'm not gonna say I don't see color because that's a fucking stupid thing to say. I
Sure.
obviously see color, but I don't. When I think about booking my shows, I don't say shit like I don't know about the cocky black guy and how the fans are like. Because somebody was quoted as saying that recently
Yeah.
about a certain wrestler, and it's like that's fucking dumb.
Hmm.
Wrestling fans want to cheer who looks the coolest and is the best wrestler and has the best matches
Oh
to
yeah.
get over, regardless. Is it a coincidence that our shows are extremely diverse and people look different and we have trans wrestlers and Mexican luchadors and African American wrestlers and people who wrestle World of Sports style
Hmm.
and people from every country and walk of life? No, because that's what makes wrestling interesting, because styles make wrestling matches.
Yes.
They're the best of those two styles against each other within the same format or in conflict. That's money.
Hell yeah. And also, again, selfishly, rocking my Matt Mako shirt today
Ah, the
for this
show.
interview. Like, I'm so glad to see these talent, on every level come up and like get to showcase their skills. But, I know I said that was my last question before, but how close do you think we are to getting produce at the ECW arena?
Uh, I don't know. I don't know yet. Like I would have to become a licensed promoter in
Mm,
Pennsylvania. Um, I don't necessarily. I mean, I'm gonna go to Ring of Honor August 21st. I bought a front row ticket myself. I still like to buy tickets to shows, even though I would
of
get
course.
because I like to choose where I sit so I can
Hmm.
appreciate understand the show how it's meant to be seen or how I would want my top customer to experience it. And I
Hmm.
don't feel comfortable as a like an indie promoter asking for like, hey, give me a comp like in the front row. Like I've looked into it before, but I'd rather pay too. Because also if I
Yeah.
pay, say whatever the fuck I want about it too. You know. So or at least I feel like I can. I don't know if it's probably frowned upon. So is that the best place to watch wrestling in Philadelphia? Maybe. I've seen shows at the Murphy Rec Center. I've seen shows at the Armory. I've
Hmm.
seen shows at the Leocoris Center. I've seen shows at the Electric Factory. I've seen shows in a lot of places in Philadelphia. I used to go to shows at the Voltage Lounge for GCW.
Oh, hell yeah.
And I produced a show for 36 hours with Brett Lauderdale in the freezing cold during COVID called Fight Forever,
Yep.
over like 100 wrestlers, where we raised about 60 grand through fan donations and commercials that I sold via email during COVID. And those are some of the most rewarding and most fun shows I've ever been to. So like I want to find the new Voltage Lounge, and I want to see if the ECW Arena is truly that place for me, or is there someplace new? Do I want to run the ICA in Philadelphia?
Hmm.
Do I run the Philadelphia Art Museum? My
Oh my
movies
God.
with the Philadelphia Film Society on July 31st, On the Line, the boxing documentary that I produced,
Hmm.
is going to be having a screening in a 287 person theater there.
Yep.
So like I'm really open. There's Philadelphia is a great place for alternative culture. There's a lot of like 24-hour film festivals, genre
Hmm.
festivals. The Black Star Film Festival happens
Great film festival.
like I think there are things to be learned from convenings of other subcultures and other mediums in wrestling that can like bring appeal and a multimedia point of view to things.